Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast, Control or Be Controlled. This podcast is designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. I remain your humble host, Darlington Obuka. Today's guest is Jim Marshall, a human development expert and polymath who has spent over 4 decades studying what drives human potential and transformation. With more than 50,000 hours dedicated to fields ranging from psychology and philosophy to science and metaphysics, Jim has developed a unique integrated approach to understand how people think, grow, and evolve. He is the creator of Septimics, a powerful framework that maps the hierarchies of human behavior and consciousness, offering practical insights into how we can better understand ourselves and others. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Darlington. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, Jim, I would like you to introduce yourself to my audience.
Okay. Well, I should first say I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I crafted a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septimics, and published in the book, Septimics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
Okay, Jim. Thank you very much. So I have a lot of questions for you, and I know my audience will also want to get answers to these questions as well. So we'll begin.
Okay.
For those hearing about you for the first time, what would you like them to understand about your work and your journey?
Well, I think the first thing that they should know about me is that I'm a polymathic intellectual. For those who don't know, a polymath is someone who's learned in multiple disparate subjects. Historical examples include Erasmus and Thomas Jefferson. So my areas of expertise include psychology, philosophy, theology, parapsychology, science, engineering, mathematics, law, literature, history, metaphysics, military science, political science, physical culture, education, human potential organization, and music. And I hold a Bachelor of Science cum laude from the City University of New York.
Okay, Jim. So you created a system called Septimics.
Yes.
So what is it?
Septimics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to human beings occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. There are 35 such scales, each of which is unique, and between them, they span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any problem, dilemma, situation, difficulty that any person has regarding people can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one. And once you can analyze it, you can deal with it effectively.
Okay. All this might be very difficult for the average person to understand. So I want you to break it into simpler terms so that the average listener can be able to understand what you are saying.
Okay. Well, let me explain it this way. Several people have said to me, what book is your book like? And in all candor, having gone to school for 28 years, I have to say, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before, at least on Earth. But of these 35 scales, every one of them is presented in what you could call a table or a spreadsheet that's very similar to the periodic table of elements. Now, you probably first saw the periodic table of elements when you were 12 or 13 or 14. And as everyone knows, the original periodic table had 79 elements, and it arranges them all horizontally and vertically in the correct order so that it makes chemistry easy to teach, easy to learn, and easy to understand. Each one of these 35 scales has a table that's like the periodic table. So, for example, there is a scale of basic purposes. So you get a periodic table for basic purposes. So this gives you a complete understanding of that subject based entirely on natural law. There is no theory of septimics. All this was based on direct empirical observation, which was the result of my work as a human development engineer over a 40-year period.
Thank you, Jim. So what makes Septimics different from other personal development or psychological frameworks?
Okay, this is an entirely new subject. It is completely impossible to fit this into some other niche. I know because I tried for many years. It cannot be done. It's like trying to get an elephant into a Volkswagen. Septimics is a very big subject, and it basically covers all of human phenomena. And in a minute, I'll tell you what the 35 scales are so that you'll see that I've covered everything, which is what readers keep telling me. So, of the 35 scales, 24 of them are called individual scales, and 11 are called group scales. These are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself will dramatically improve the life of the reader. And let me give you a simple example of how that would work. I mentioned the scale of motivation. One of the most important things to know about anyone is the person's motivation. Why is this person doing this? The answer is that's his motivation. So I have done the heavy lifting in each of these cases, getting it down to only 7 possibilities. So there are only 7 basic human motivations. Now you might say, well, there are thousands of possible motivations. Yes, but they're all just subsets of these. So you could take the scale of motivation and you could ask yourself, what is my mother's motivation toward me? What is my father's motivation toward me? What is my boss's motivation toward me? What is my spouse's motivation toward me? And you could do this for every person you know or have ever known. Now, every time you get a correct answer, you'll have an insight, or you might call it a realization. You'll say, oh, now I understand why my mother does that. She's at level 2 on the scale of motivation. Therefore, she does X, Y, and Z. Now I understand it. And then you could take the same scale and you could reverse the vector and ask, what is my motivation toward my cousin? What is my motivation toward my grandfather? What is my motivation toward Joe? And you could ask that for all the people you know or have ever known. Now, again, every time you get a correct answer, you'll have an insight. Oh, now I understand why I couldn't get along with Gertrude when we dated 5 years ago. She had this motivation and it conflicted with mine. So you see, this is very useful information. And by the time you finish this exercise, you will have had, depending on how many people you know, something like 400 or 500 insights. So you will be greatly clarified mentally about all these people and about the subject of motivation in general. So let's say you're dating some girl for 3 years and you're thinking about getting married. Wouldn't it make sense to ask, why does this woman want to marry me? I mean, isn't that a sensible question? I'm not saying to ask the woman. I'm saying, look in the book. If you ask her, you don't know what you're going to get. The answer is in the book because there are only 7 choices. Now, you know her because you've been around her for 3 years, so once you study the book, you will see that each level is defined very clearly. It's not vague. So you'll see, I see. She wants to marry me because she loves me. That's level 1, the highest level of all, the highest motivation. So let's set the date. But maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe what happens is you say, now that I think about this for a while, I'm convinced now that she wants to marry me because I drive a Maserati, I have a 60-foot yacht, I fly my own Learjet, and I live in a $20 million condo. See, that's a different motivation. That's level 4, money. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. It's just that level. Now, what you choose to do about that is up to you. You might say, well, okay, this is not the first woman who wanted to marry me for my money, but this one is beautiful, funny, congenial, polite, affectionate, so I'm going to marry her anyway. And you might live happily ever after, knowing what her motivation is. That does happen sometimes. But maybe you're the type of guy who says, I don't want to marry a woman who wants to marry me for my money. I want to marry a woman who loves me for myself, and you break up with her. Now, in that case, don't think you're going to be upset about that. You will not. You'll be relieved. You'll say, thank goodness I figured this out now before I wound up owing her $15,000 a month in alimony. And now when you go forward to look elsewhere, you're a little bit smarter on the subject. Maybe you don't mention that you drive a Maserati until you sort of find out what she thinks of you. So that's how this works. So it's very useful information and can help basically anybody with any human situation.
So, Jim, does Septimics apply to everyone, or are there specific types of people it works best for?
Well, there are a couple of answers to that. Septimics applies across all demographics. In other words, it doesn't matter your gender, your race, your nationality, your socioeconomic level, your educational level. None of those things matter. It applies to everyone regardless of those. Having said that, it's also true that this book is for people who want to improve themselves or others. Now, some people make the mistake of thinking that everyone wants to improve oneself or others, and they're wrong. There are many categories of people who have no interest whatsoever in improving either themselves or others. This would include psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, professional criminals, corrupt politicians, war criminals, serial murderers, mentally insane people, mentally retarded people, ignorant people. There's a lot of people who are not up to the idea of improving themselves or others. So this book wouldn't apply to them in the sense that they probably wouldn't read it. If they did read it, they wouldn't understand it. And even if they didn't understand it, they wouldn't apply it because it's contrary to their way of life. So there's really two separate answers to that.
So in what ways can this system help people improve their relationships, whether with family, with friends, or in business?
Okay. There are 3 ways in which Septimics is beneficial to anyone who uses it. Firstly, each of these 35 scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons up the scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. More importantly, just finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is inherently enlightening and beneficial. Every time you correctly spot a level, you have, as I said before, an insight or realization. You say, oh, that explains why my parents can't get along. He's at this level and she's at this level. So that's very beneficial to a person because you're understanding people better. And finally, once you know the correct level, meaning the actual level of a person on any scale, you can improve that person by moving them up one level at a time. Now, this is monumentally important because I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years. And let me tell you what I mean by that. We all have problems and dilemmas and situations that we can't resolve. And more than 99% of the time, it's because we don't know the gradient. All good coaches, teachers, facilitators, therapists understand that human development must be done on a gradient. You cannot make an Olympic athlete out of a couch potato. It cannot be done. There are too many intervening levels. So the fact that I'm giving you these 7 levels, those are the gradients for each of the corresponding 35 areas. So each one of these scales is a roadmap for success in that area, because you determine what level you're at, or if you're helping another, you determine the other person, and then you move them up one level. So let's say you find you're at level 5. You target yourself for level 4, and you forget about the rest of it. It's not relevant. Now, if you are truly at level 5, and you make a serious effort to get to level 4, you will get there. And the reason is, it's the next level up. So I'm making it easy for people to succeed. I'm giving you the gradients. So that's how this is helpful to people.
Can you walk us through one of the skills and how it works in real life? A real life application of the skills.
Okay. So, well, I mentioned before the scale of motivation, right? Where you figure out this woman who wants to marry you, figure out her motivation, and it helps you decide if you want to marry her or not. Now, let's say you own a car dealership and you need a new salesman. So you're interviewing people, and if you listen carefully, people will tell you their levels. So this guy makes it perfectly clear that he is a money-motivated person. Hire him. That's what you want. He gets a percentage for every car he sells. So in this case, it's the same scale, it's the same level, it's a different result. So you don't want to marry a woman who is motivated by money, but you want to hire a salesman who is. So you see, that's very practical and useful. So I'll give you a further example. Let's say you invite me to look at your garden. I've been into gardening my whole life. So I go to Darlington's house, and I go in the backyard, and I say, oh, Darlington has forget-me-nots, irises, hydrangeas, tulips, roses, begonias. And the reason I can analyze it that way is because I know a lot about flowers, because I've been working with them my whole life. Now, if you bring a 5-year-old girl into that garden, could be on the same day. She's going to see and smell exactly what I saw and smelled, but all she can say is, these are pretty and they smell nice. That's all she knows. Most adults are like that little girl regarding people. They don't know what they're looking at, which is why in the United States, more than 50% of the people who get married get divorced. Clearly, those two people did not understand one another. If they had this material, they would have understood the person better, and they either would not have gotten married, or they would have lived happily ever after. So, let's say you have a guy. Friday night comes, he gets up, dressed up in his best suit, he goes to a nice bar to meet a young lady. So he meets this young lady, he buys her a drink, and they're talking, right? Now he's thinking to himself, boy, she's pretty and she smells nice. That's the same thing the little girl just said about your garden. This guy has no idea what he's getting himself into. If he had these skills, he would be able to spot her on some of these, and it would tell him either positive or negative if he wants to be with her or pursue the relationship. So, to give you an actual live situation that I have. I'm a single guy. So about a year ago, I met this gorgeous blonde, and we were both very interested in one another. So now we're going through the normal getting to know you routine. What kind of movies do you like? What kind of restaurants do you like? And so forth, right? There are a lot of conversations like that at the beginning of a relationship. So we're talking, and I noticed that she's low on a certain scale. I didn't say anything, I just made a note of it. Then we had another conversation, similar conversation. I noticed she's low on another scale. Okay. And then we had another conversation. I noticed she's low on that scale. So then I said, wait a minute. I barely know this woman, and I already know that she's low on 3 scales. Knowing this material, what that tells me is if I get to know her well, I'm going to find out that she's low on 10 or 12 or 15 scales. And that is not somebody I'm going to get involved with because, as I point out in the book, all of the trouble in society is caused by people who are at or near the bottom of the scales. So, the next time I saw her, I said, you're a lovely person, and I like you very much, but pass. I'm going to pass on this. She was shocked. You know why she was shocked? She was so gorgeous. I was probably the first guy that ever said that to her. Because we didn't have a fight or an argument or a disagreement or anything like that. It was going along I just could see that she was at the bottom, at or near the bottom of several of these scales, and that's not somebody I'm going to get involved in, because those are the people who cause you all kinds of trouble. So I ended it and I moved on. Now think about this. Think about all the money I saved myself in $100 dinners taking her out. Think about all the time I saved in going on dates with a person where the relationship was not going to go anywhere. Think about all the aggravation I saved myself in ending it before it got to be a train wreck. So this is true for all of these scales. It's very useful information. I could go on all day giving you examples how this works. You spot a person at a certain level. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. If it's high, that's a good indicator. That's a good reason to keep the person around. If it's low, that's a bad indicator. It's a good reason to break off the relationship. But remember, you don't need to know all the levels of all the scales. For example, I have a guy who works on my car. Now, on the scale of human ability, he is at least a level 3 regarding auto mechanics, which is expert. He is an expert. This guy knows more about cars than I'm ever going to know, and I know a lot about cars. So he's the only person I let touch my car. Anything goes wrong with my car, I go right to him. He knows exactly what's wrong with it. He fixes it. The next day I pick it up and pay him. Think about how easy that makes my life. I don't have to go shopping around. I don't have to wonder, is this guy going to cheat me out of money or anything like that? I've got that down. This guy knows his business. Now, I don't know where he is on these other scales. I made no attempt to find out. It's not important to me. Is he high on the scale of literacy? Probably not. Now, if I were looking for somebody to edit a book, I would look for somebody who was high on the scale of literacy. So if the person were below level 4, I definitely would not hire him. So that's kind of how this works. It's very user-friendly. It's not hard to figure out. The book is very clear.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. You have basically exhausted all my questions that I have for you. So one more last thing is, where can my audience know more about you or know about your book and try and get your book as well?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would invite your audience to my website, which is septimics.com. Septemics, where you can see what many readers have said about it, what many journalists have written about it. You can read the reviews. You can read sections of the book itself. And there's even a pre-recorded audio called Introduction to Septimics that you can listen to that explains this subject to a new person in 15 minutes. And having said that, I want to just say one sentence to put this in context. The data in this book is vital for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random. There are many things that people do not understand. They can't figure it out. When you read this book, you will understand it. You will figure it out because you will see, now I understand why I couldn't get along with Betty Lou when we dated 4 years ago, because she's at this level on this scale. And when you do that, it clears your mind. You're not thinking about it anymore. So this material definitely reduces depression and anxiety, because when you know exactly what you're dealing with, you're not going to be depressed or anxious. You're just going to deal with it in a rational way and go forward.
Okay, Jim. Thank you very much, Jim. You have given my audience a lot of value today, and I'm so happy to have you. Thank you for sharing your depth of knowledge and the work you have dedicated so much of your life to. Thank you very much, Jim. It was a pleasure having you on my show. To everyone who is
You're
listening,
welcome.
you need to understand from what Jim is saying that understanding yourself is one of the most powerful things you can ever do, according to Jim. And the real question is whether you choose to stay at the surface or go deeper. Until next time, I'll see you again on this same podcast. Take control or be controlled. See you guys in the next episode.
Thanks, Darlington.
Thank you, Jim. Goodbye, Jim.